Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome back to the Rebel, Reject, Create podcast, where we dive into all things creative and how to make the world a better place by being more creative. And my guest today is Professor Mark Deuze, who is the head of media studies over at the head professor of media studies over at the University of Amsterdam, and the author of an extremely interesting book which came out towards the end of last year, which is all about how what you love can also make you sick. So, welcome to the show, Mark. I was very intrigued by your book.
Yeah. Thanks. Great to be on the show. And yeah, that subtitle kind of gets people to share stories a lot.
Right,
Like what makes you happy can also make you sick. It's definitely also the conclusion of the book, as well as sort of encapsulating lots of people's sort of lived experience of what it means to turn your creativity into a career, obviously loving what you do, and then often realizing that the industry within which you do it don't love you back. And that kind of like, how am I dealing with that? That is,
right,
that's a tough call there, right there.
right. So, for people who haven't discovered the book yet,
Mm.
can you give us a quick top line of what you're actually presenting within the book?
Well, a couple of years ago, I came across some research about 10 years ago in that case, it was game developers around the world, and a separate study, a survey among people working in Australian film and television and theater. And so completely different random surveys collected by professional associations. And both surveys reported the same data, which is that the majority of people in these industries indicated they were very grateful for the chance to do this kind of work, and they love doing what they do, and they were happy. And at the same time, a majority of people in the both surveys said, "Well, this work isn't good for my health."
Wow, it sounds like
And
an abusive relationship.
exactly. And look, I've been interviewing people in these kind of industries, journalists, game developers, filmmakers, and so on, for my entire career since for over the last 30 years or so. And all of a sudden, when I was reading these surveys, it occurred to me that I never really asked questions about health and well-being. I
Right.
was always asking questions about creativity.
Hmm.
Like, how do you make it work? I know you're under a lot of stress, right? You have to please the investors and the people who give you the subsidies, and you have to please the audience, and you have to deal with friggin' algorithms. But I know you want to tell these great stories. How do you get to do that? So those were always my questions because I was a fan. I was excited.
Right.
But then I realized after reading the surveys, well, what I was really talking about with these people, with these colleagues, these peers, these professionals was, I mean, how do you stay sane?
Right. Well,
And
the
and and
assumption is that they
yeah.
never were sane, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like one of those, it's a good point that you're making because all these industries, creative industries, have their own myths about what it takes to be creative.
Yeah.
And those myths actually are always about really unhealthy romantic ideals, like party hard, live hard, you rock hard, live fast, die young, chain smoking, cigarettes, journalists with trench coats, chain smoking, drinking too much coffee, or so. I mean, all these industries have a sort of cool archetype that if you actually look at the archetype is like it's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
And related to your comment, if you're not completely sane, you won't last more than a year in these industries as a regular professional, right?
Right.
Because you have to navigate so many stressors from job uncertainty, from constantly changing technologies, from operating at the whim of often completely unpredictable bosses and clients. I mean, there's so much going on that you have to deal with
Right.
that if you are not somehow disciplined and focused and, in other words, kind of sane,
Yeah.
you mean off you go, right?
Right.
And
Wow.
so the myth of the creative professional who's a little bit crazy to begin with is exactly that, a myth.
Ha. Ha. Okay. So, well, I mean, when I started reading the book, I was kind of shocked because I was like, I didn't realize this was so structural.
Right.
I mean, it sounds like somebody kind of went out of their way to create something that was bad and would torture people.
Well, yeah, and that's I think that's a really important point that the issue is not that creative people are, stupid, that they willingly accept their own exploitation, or that they're a bit crazy, so they don't get how the industry works, and so
Right.
they fall victim to it. It's not that people are, snowflakes, or that they're
Yeah.
not resilient enough. Hell no. I mean, I think creative workers are among the most resilient professionals on the planet because look at what they all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
It's That's not it. The issue is structure. Exactly what you say. The problem is in the system, not in its people.
Right.
And because any other conclusion would would individualize the problem. It's,
Huh.
it's it's like, in the 90s when women started to make real inroads in the professional workspace. And and we soon realized, oh, there's a gender pay gap. It still exists today. In most countries around the world, women get paid less than men for the same work. And the solution to that problem was always, well, women need to learn to negotiate the way men negotiate, or they have to be more assertive the way men are. In
Yeah.
other words, the structural problem, sexism, was individualized, and
Right.
to, well, women need to step up.
Yeah.
And that's the same discussion here. The structure of the creative industries evidently makes people sick, is unhealthy for people. And
Yeah.
the solutions is, well, people need to be more resilient and
Right.
more sane. And like, no, that's not the solution.
Okay. All right. So, for anybody who's not really in the media or creative industries, can you give an example of the kind of structure you're talking about?
Well, I mean, in the book, I boil it down to three fairly straightforward principles that I get out of the literature of occupational medicine, and that in other words, the literature that looks at what aspects of work predictably make people sick at work.
Hmm.
And then I've applied that insight to my research among creative professionals, people in music, in film, in journalism, in games, and those kind of fields. It's fairly straightforward. The three variables are, people get sick at work if there's a structural mismatch between what you bring to the work, your talent, your skills, but also your passion and your love and your personality, and what the work gives back to you, like in terms of money and salary, working conditions, but also recognition, reward, appreciation, and those kind of things. Secondly, what makes people sick at work if they experience the way decisions are made at work as either fair or unjust. So if who gets the cool gig, who gets the promotion, who gets to be successful, who gets to be rewarded, if that is based on transparent policies, on you having a voice, if it's based on clear communication, if there's protocols for redress, then that's fair. But if all of that is absent, which is pretty much a definition of what working in creative fields is like, decisions often feel random or perhaps even nepotistic. I mean, there's so much discrimination in the creative industries
Yeah.
that can't be just attributed to a handful of shitty racists. It's more structural.
Right. I mean, that for
And
me was
and
one of the most surprising things that you say in the book. You think, yeah, because you think creatives, they must be more open-minded, more
no,
inclusive, more diverse, and it's like,
no, no.
what?
I mean, as anybody who works creatively can tell you, the moment you work in the creative industries, you realize that the industry part of the creative industries is run on fear. The fear of risk, the fear of
Wow.
change, the fear of doing something out of the box, the fear of diversity, the fear, because what diversity means is getting people on your team that think differently.
Yeah.
Well, nobody has time for that because deadline, because formats, because, well, this is a great idea that you have, but we need to fill these gaps. We need to, you want the color yellow, but the client wants red. So fuck you, right? And so the whole notion that the creative industries is actually a marriage between two concepts that are anathema. So that's the second variable, right? Is in the feeling that the way decisions are made are just not fair, not transparent, not
Yeah.
just. And if you experience that long enough, you kind of burn out. And the third variable is, one thing that is really awesome about creative work is that it's often intense,
Mm.
right? Working towards deadline, finishing that amazing project, seeing a story go live, a film coming out, people playing your game, or a performance that finally, is staged in a theater that you wrote or that you acted in or whatever. That's awesome. That those final days or weeks pushing hard, all-nighters with cold pizza, it's beautiful, right? Um, um, but if that work pressure is combined with a lack of autonomy over what kind of work you're doing and how you're doing that work, then people burn out.
Right.
This is true for any professional field, but particularly in the media industry. I mean, any interview with any media professional I've ever done in my entire career, autonomy was always right up there as the most important thing for their work. It's like,
Right.
let me be free to tell the story that I want to tell in the way I want to tell it, and at the end, give me a high five, and everything else will be fine.
Yeah.
And let me make the music that I love. Let me make the film that I care about. But that autonomy for most people in the creative industries is lacking.
Right.
It doesn't exist.
Sure.
And so one of the hard lessons to learn as a creative is how do you navigate, how do you negotiate, how do you find a way to still put your stamp, your voice in your work. Sorry. But while at the same time dealing with all the stressors or issues that limit your autonomy.
Yeah.
And if that goes structurally wrong, in other words, intense workload combined with little or no autonomy, people burn out. And
Right.
those three things together, my argument is, are structural in the creative industries. They're
Yeah.
incidental in other industries. They occur everywhere.
Yeah.
But in the creative industries, this is how businesses are run.
Right.
And
So,
and yeah,
okay. So in the book and in the presentation I saw you do recently, you quote some pretty scary figures. Yeah, I mean, you've used the word burnout a few times now,
right.
but the rates of burnout in the creative and cultural industries are frankly scary. Can you run us through that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a review of the book that was published recently, and the reviewer said yeah, after reading a little bit in the book, she said like, okay, I get it now. Like this stuff is relentless, and 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 um, somebody called my book angry, which I never felt when I was writing it, but I appreciate that the emotion that you feel when you read all of it is anger, because yes, if you look at the data that I collected over the last 10 years across all these disciplines, these professions all over the world, there's a clear pattern that the majority of people in creative careers are often equally happy and thankful to be doing the work, as well as indicating that they're struggling or suffering because of the work. That the actual data suggests that, the rates of stress, job-related stress, of burnout, even of suicidal ideation and suicidality in the creative sector are among the highest in all occupational groups. I mean, the highest
Wow.
are in healthcare and education, but shortly thereafter, it's media and entertainment
Hmm.
around the world. And so that is really yeah, that actually is a bit scary. And and
Terrifying.
and it gets worse if you consider that there's a growing awareness about this, and there's laudable initiatives being deployed and all kinds of organizations around the world that are active in the field of addressing this, both within but also outside of all kinds of companies. But that the figures actually show that things generally are getting worse.
Yeah.
And that is and I think that's really important to consider, because that again shows that the problem is structural
Mm.
rather than related to a handful of I mean, around the Me Too scandal, or which ties into our conversation today, there were a couple of American journalists who started a shitty media men list online,
Right.
listing, like, bad apples and media organizations that were toxic or abusive. Um, it's not just a handful of shitty media men.
Yeah.
I would say it's actually built into the design of these industries.
Right.
To get rid of Harvey Weinstein doesn't solve transgressive behavior in the creative industries.
No. So what does? I mean, from all of this research and studying, I'm kind of hoping you've got some ideas about how to fix this.
Well, yeah, and look, I mean, like you said, the book came out last year, September, and I've given God knows how many presentations around this, workshops with people in the industry, um, and I'm working now on a project where I do exactly that, is indicate, okay, what have people been telling me about what they're doing to address this, right? And a lot of people are, both individually as well as certain companies, studios, agencies, or professional associations. There's a lot happening. And the first thing is that as we talked about earlier, a solution lies at the individual level. I mean that, and what that means is it besides investing in creative skills that you need to succeed in profession, right? You have to be a really good editor, or you have to be great at playing the guitar, or the typical skills that you learn in a professional environment. A real significant skill that you can invest in is your own mental health literacy. And
Right.
I say this from the realization that, generally speaking, our own literacy when it comes to mental health tends to be fairly limited.
Yeah.
People aren't really good at understanding what goes on in their bodies, how to link emotions with cognition, with,
Physical
what
states.
exactly. So we often, only realize that work is making us sick when we burn out, when we
Right.
when we run up against quite literally against the wall,
Yeah.
and by that time it's too late, right? So being able to understand and appreciate what your own boundaries are, how you respond. If I talk with students about this, to explain this, I always tell them, so, well, if you want to get a handle on your own mental health literacy, you have to ask yourself, how good are you at handling rejection? When you ask somebody out, or when your partner, your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, breaks up with you, what are you the kind of person who, crawls into a corner and only eats chocolate for 3 months, or are you next day you're back on the market, or like, because that says a lot about your boundaries and how you handle, because, and anyway, so that's just a little shortcut there.
Yeah.
But so self-care, setting boundaries, be careful about feelings of gratitude and thankfulness about doing this kind of work. You don't owe anybody your thanks or gratitude,
Yeah.
right? Because what that does, to put it in fancy terms, it depoliticizes the work,
Yeah.
and work is friggin' political, right? Work comes with rights.
Yeah.
Work comes with labor laws and a client's or employer's duty of care. Work comes with, professional structures, collective organization, unions. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
and the moment you start infusing work with things like passion and gratitude, all of that goes out of the window.
Ooh. It sounds like we need a Hippocratic oath for the creative and
Yeah,
cultural industries.
absolutely. Well, and that's something I often talk about when I give these presentations about solutions. Well, how would creative work look like if it's based on a ethical duty of care, right? If it starts with treating people fairly and respectfully and empathically, because there's somehow this weird idea that bullying people gets them to do their best creative work.
Yeah, no
Right? I mean,
science anywhere proves that. It's just ridiculous.
but I mean, just recently, the director of a famous orchestra here in the Netherlands was fired for transgressive behavior, and in the reporting on it, they said, but he was also so renowned for getting orchestras to be at the top of their game.
Yeah.
What the fuck, right? I mean, that's a journalist, and the same journalist is experiencing that in his own newsroom.
Right. So it's totally normal for him. So
Exactly. And that is a symptom of something. So anyway, so there's that.
yeah.
You get organizations that really can make a difference here. I mean, like I said earlier, make sure that your decision-making procedures are transparent and fair, that they're accountable.
Mm,
Clear policies for things like safety, psychosocial safety. I mean, most labor laws around the world traditionally only mentioned physical safety at work, but
yeah.
today includes psychosocial safety. Well, what's your policy for making people feel safe at work?
Right.
What's your policy about inclusion?
Yeah.
Modern leadership is about empathy. It's not about yelling and screaming at people and putting people under pressure all the time and all that kind of stuff. So train empathic leaders and managers, professionalize leadership, right? Who becomes the leader in creative fields
Yeah.
tends to be the best storytellers. Well,
Yeah.
that's wonderful, but it doesn't equate healthy leadership.
No, I mean that reminds me of that whole story about how IBM lost market share to Microsoft because they made all their programmers managers.
Right. Yeah. The programmers had no idea how to deal with hundreds of people under their
No,
care.
no,
And it's the same with, editors in newsrooms. I mean, some of them, of course, are amazing human beings and very empathic, and they want to do the best. But generally speaking, when you become a leader in a creative field, you get rewarded for the way you've always done things. So that becomes the model that you expect and project onto the people underneath you. But what
right.
worked for you, as
Yeah.
any good leader would know, doesn't necessarily work for anybody else.
So the environment shapes you, and then you shape the environment with that experience.
And that feedback loop creates the structural problem that we're talking about.
Jeez.
And what organizations can do as well is like I gave a presentation on this in a newsroom of a fairly well-known news brand. I won't name names recently, and there were about 150 people there. And at the end, one of the chiefs, one of the directors said, "Okay, Mark, I hear you. Convincing story. What can I do tomorrow morning
Yeah.
with all of this?" And honestly, the first thing that I came up with was like, maybe just ask people how they're doing.
Yeah.
And
Smart.
what I mean with that is to normalize conversations about health and well-being.
Yeah.
That it's normal to say, today was kind of tough. I just spoke to a student a week or two ago who was doing an internship at a quality national newspaper. And she was telling me the story of being sent to an assignment that was really tough. It was something about trauma victims. She had to interview them. She came back with the story. Editor loved it. So job well done. And at the end of the day, she was sitting with one of the senior colleagues, having a coffee and sort of saying, today was a tough one. And his response was, well, then you're not cut out to be a journalist.
Wow.
Right? That's about shutting people down. That is a recipe for stress and burnout right there, that
Yeah.
response. That's also a response of somebody who doesn't want to deal with this.
That's a trauma-related response.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I get it. I'm not judging him for it, but the point is a leader can make a difference here and saying like, it's actually okay to check in with each other. It's okay to say that something was tough, even though you love doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and finally, the sector as a whole has a responsibility here too. I mean, think about, different film studios collaborating on mental health campaigns.
Right.
Like in Australia at the moment, just the other day in May, earlier May, a mental health action plan was launched that was underwritten by, the ABC, Netflix, and a whole bunch of other companies, as well as professional associations in the Australian screen industry. So that's really important. These kind of sort of not like a new law or a new protocol, but just an action plan.
Yeah.
We're in this together. We appreciate that this is an important thing. That challenging myths about what it takes to be a good creative.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't mean that you have to struggle, that you have to suffer, that you have to accept not being paid, that it's okay that somebody bullies you and yells at you in public and those kind of things. No, fairness, inclusion, that is actually what really makes people do their best possible work.
Yeah.
And I think also one thing that the sector can really do, as would be my last comment about this, is to think about its own sustainability. Because when the media and creative industries talk about sustainability today, it often is in relation to things on the outside, like AI
Right.
or audiences that don't want to pay for things, right? It's like there's the pressure is coming from the outside. And so if we want to sustain ourselves, we have to defend ourselves against that.
Right. That's such a romantic notion, right? All of us together against the baddies out there.
Yeah, but the problem is the sector itself doesn't invest in sustainability as a sector. What I mean with that is that, well, I'll give you a very concrete example. About 80% of people in film and television never ever work on more than one project and then they're gone. The average length of a journalism career is between 3 to 5 years and then they're
Whoa.
gone. I mean, in the UK, earlier this year, various trade journals reported that the agency churn rate in advertising, marketing, and PR was at its highest historically. And the churn rate means that the speed within which new people leave the profession.
Yeah.
And this is structural. I mean, the dirty secret of the creative industries is that they accept that it's so easy to get a job there because it is, because everybody accepts that within 1 to 3 years, all those people will have left again. And so that's the absolute opposite of sustainability,
Yeah.
right? I
Mark,
mean, so invest in sustainable careers. It's like, how do you attract and keep talent? And I don't see that in the considerations of most media and creative fields. They just accept, well, if you don't want to do this, I've got 12 other people willing to do this for half price.
that's exactly it. I experienced that when I was coming up. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is a desire. I mean, how does that relate to ideals of creativity and letting people do their best work and
Does
the,
not.
you know, training and developing and cultivating storytellers who will give us what we all need, which is friggin' shared narratives. If this world needs something right now, it's shared narratives, not
Mark,
ego
that's
narratives.
brilliant. And we have to stop now because we could
Sorry,
talk
yeah.
about this all day, I think, quite easily. So thanks so much for squeezing us in for this episode. It's really nice to chat to you. Where can people find the book? Because I think, I mean, I kind of agree with the one review. It's like, wow, man, I'm just being slapped about the face here. There's so much. But I think it also really opened my eyes. So where can people buy it?
So, thanks for that. So, the book is available. I mean, you can order it on all the usual online stops. I mean,
Right.
I would encourage people to get it at the publisher, Intellect. You can get it to them directly. They will send it to you wherever you are. For your listeners and viewers or your audience, if they buy it and they type in as a coupon Intellect 10, they get 10% off. So I can
Woohoo.
give you that.
Cool. I'll put that in the
Um,
show notes.
yeah, Intellect and then 10. Other than that, if you want to, the quick and dirty of the book, I have a Substack that's free. Mark Deuze at substack.com. And there's like a bunch of summaries, interviews like this one,
Right.
a bunch of podcasts that I've been privileged to be on. And I regularly post. I also post interviews with people in the field there, so where I get my data from.
Cool.
So it's that's if you can't be bothered to go through the entire book, and it is a bit of an intense thing,
It is a
but
bit of a intense thing.
yeah.
All right. Mark, thank you so much. I'm going to share those links in the show notes so people can follow up and check out and get more information. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
All right. And thank you to everybody for tuning in and listening to Rebel, Reject, Create. If you are in the creative fields, I can highly recommend you buy Mark's book, In the Interests of Self-Preservation and Self-Care. Until next time, be more creative.